Americans for Tax Reform, a conservative organization, held its annual Cost of Government Day at the National Press Club July 16th, the day when the average American completes paying off their share of federal, state, and local taxes. Americans had to work 197 days this year to meet all costs imposed by the government through taxation.
For those of us who work in Washington, sometimes we have to content ourselves with making an incremental change. That sadly the world is not run by conservative and libertarian think tank scholars, so I think we have to kind of start with what's practical. And on the spending side, there are a few things we can do. I think earmark reform is a very worthy goal that's gotten some attention. Our Republican presidential nominee, John McCain, has been very good in that issue. I'd like to see at least some talk of, cutting some programs that have been on our list for years, whether it's National Endowment for the Arts or National Endowment for the Humanities. I think those are good targets. I think just placing an overall limit on how quickly spending can grow, I think that would be a worthwhile goal, that even though we might be limiting programs, slowing their growth, I think over time it would be a good thing. On the tax side, I think the number one priority should be trying to make the Bush tax cuts permanent. I realize there may not be quite the votes to do that in Congress this year, but I think that's a worthwhile goal. I think they have given people off tax relief. I think they have helped grow the economy. I also think another thing that's going to be coming up very soon is the alternative minimum tax. That was sort of put in place back in the 1960s to make sure the very wealthy paid some taxes, but as people are getting wealthier, more and more people are getting trapped under that, and I think that reform of that needs to be a top priority as well.
You do need to have a revenue source for government. There's no question that some level of taxation higher than zero is probably needed to pay for necessary government services. Now, what that level is, there's been a lot of research on it. It's probably somewhere around 10 or 15%. It's certainly not at the level of half of every day that you work going to pay for government, which is what we have now, between the explicit burden of taxes and the impact of regulatory compliance and so on. So I think that we need to really look at what the legitimate functions of government are, what we need government to do, what we can't do in the private sector, and it's a pretty small set of things. Clearly, defense of our country, the military, a court system, public safety, things like that we certainly need government to do, and we certainly should pay for government to do. But the hundreds and thousands of programs that try to micromanage areas of people's lives rest on this assumption that bureaucrats and legislators know how we should live our lives better than we do, and that's just not true. The results show that time after time we get worse results when we send our money away to Washington or to state capitals, and then they give it back to us and tell us what to do.
Obviously, we've got two choices. We've got John McCain, who has steadfastly been opposing the growth of government and spending and earmarks, and we call it pork. And then we have, on the other hand, we have a man named Obama. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Obama. And of course, he will greatly increase taxing and government spending and our dependence on government, which is the reverse of what we need. So, yeah, I think some things can be done, and if we elect the right representatives, they'll get done. We've got to hold our elected representatives responsible for what the voters want. And so far, there's a lot of elected representatives that get elected, and then they do the reverse of what those who elected them sent them to Washington for. That's got to stop.
While lower taxes and spending cuts remain a constant debate on Capitol Hill, Americans for Tax Reform hope they will be able to hold the event sooner than later next year. I'm Nicholas Palissy, CNSnews.com, Washington.